Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. We have a crazy story to bring to you guys today. It's new to me. I just came across this story in this article and I had to share it with you guys. It's from The Guardian from 2010, and it is a story of a woman detailing her psychological and physical abuse of her husband over a many-year period. And I just wanted to cover this and highlight it because the way that she's treated is insane. And I want people to think about, as we go over this, if this was a man talking about how he treated his wife, do you think that he would be treated the same way? And it also reminded me of something that I don't know if we've talked about before. We'll get into that, but let's first bring up the article. You're wondering, what am I talking about? It is this article from The Guardian. Now, I do want to say real quick, I do not think that this same article would be published in The Guardian today. I don't think that they would put this out, and you'll see why as we go through it. But the title of the article, this is under the experience section, is called Experience I Used to Hit My Husband. So obviously, just giving people a trigger warning, we're going to be talking about uncomfortable things, I guess. We're going to be talking about psychological, physical, emotional abuse of men towards men from women. And before I get into this, I just want to allow people to know of a word. If you haven't heard this word before, it's called misandry. Misandry is the dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men. Okay? And to go into that in a little more detail, it is the hatred of, contempt for, or prejudice against men or boys, and that this can be done. This misandry is seen in modern laws, like concerning divorce, DV, circumcision, male, grape, and other things. These can be seen as examples of institutional misandry, which is essentially institutional prejudice against men and boys, which is a very real thing, I think, in our society. So I wanted to give you guys that word and definition before we went through this article, because I think this woman, and guess what, as you'll see, she's a divorce lawyer. Ding ding. An industry rife with misandry. I think that's what she suffers from. She has a contempt, I think, and hatred for men, but she's not willing to take responsibility or accountability. So let's get into the article. She just starts off right off the bat with this. The first time I struck him was during an argument over money. He'd decided to pay off a loan without telling me, and we'd gone overdrawn. I was worried and tried to discuss it with him, at which point he left the room. I felt we hadn't talked it through properly and followed him. The next minute, I was hitting him around the head. So I want to unpack this for a second, because anyone who's grown up with narcissistic abuse, you'll know exactly what this is and what this is talking about. So, first of all, this man had done nothing wrong, right? Paying off a loan is a good thing. That's a positive. So he was trying to do something that was helpful. He may have made a mistake, which, caused the overdraft, but that's just a mistake. I mean, that's not something to make a huge deal out of or to be worried about. It's just something that, okay, now we need to pay this fee, and then we handle it. Though this is not like her response is disproportionate to the situation, right? This inconvenience that has occurred. She feels worried, and then she claims that he left the room and she followed him. So what this is, and my mother used to do this to me all the time, is they will screech and scream at you nonstop, and they'll nitpick and prod and poke, trying to get a response from you, trying to get you to argue back with them or give them whatever it is that they want. And it makes you feel like you have to go into fight or flight because there's this person that is getting in your face, screeching and screaming at you, and you try to leave it to have some space, some personal space, and they won't give you your space. They're following you, they're screeching, they're loud. It's like it's gross, and it really does. It takes so much patience and self-control to not do back to them what they're doing to you. So he handled the situation correctly, which is when she's screeching at him and not dropping this, he leaves the room, and that's of course when she physically lashes out. And again, I want you to consider how she's still talking about this. I remember losing control and my limbs lashing out. Oh, okay. She had no control. What a victim she was, that her arms just started, hitting her husband on their own. That's how, literally how she's describing this happening. Like it's just something that happened to her. She had no control. She could not, stop her. Please, please, ma'am, you had control. You did not want to enact it, you gave into the impulse to do something, which is just an impulse in the moment. It's an impulse you feel in the moment. Everybody has the ability to not give in to that, okay? But she's still describing it as this thing that just happened to her, just overcome her, and her arms just started doing this themselves. She says, afterwards, he was upset and I cried. I felt scared and ashamed of what I'd done. I apologized and thought it was a one-off, but in fact, it was a pattern that carried on for the next 10 years. So again, unpacking this, she attacks him over something trivial, physically, and then she cries and plays the victim and claims that she's scared. What, like, imagine a man doing this to his wife and then crying and telling her he feels scared and like she's supposed to console him or something. This is like what this woman is describing. It's amazing how entitled. Yeah, you should have felt ashamed, but obviously you didn't feel ashamed or scared enough because you kept doing it. And as she says, for 10 years. And that's also at this point, not to victim blame or anything like that, but her husband is a grown man. He should have enforced boundaries and not allowed this to happen. The fact that he continued to allow her to do this and enabled her abuse says that he, obviously, this is not somebody that is very masculine. In my opinion, this is more like a situation where in this relationship, the wife wears the pants in the relationship and the man is more submissive, I guess. She says, I met my husband through mutual friends at Durham University. I was 19 and he was 5 years older, more worldly and mature. He was less serious too, and he made me laugh. We married 5 years later. He had a job in IT by then, and I started to work as a divorce lawyer. The early days of our marriage were steady, but as the stress of my job and responsibilities grew, I took it out on him. So what are we learning about this then? And women being in the workforce and trying to do men's jobs and be in a male space and male environment, right? Because they're not built for these things. And so what's happening to her is she's trying to be a man at work, and then she comes home and she's still being an aggressive man, right? Like what she's doing at work is like this high-powered divorce lawyer, girl boss, whatever. And so, yeah, this is exactly what you would expect. She says, after that first time, it happened again about 18 months later. I felt a surge of rage again, she says, couldn't control. And just applying like a little bit of statement analysis here, couldn't control. Couldn't is a definitive word. It's conclusive. And it means could not. She felt a surge of rage she could not control. This is a lie. Everybody has the ability to control their behavior, okay? She could control it. she chose not to, and she chose to give in to the impulse. And in fact, I would suggest she enjoyed doing it. I think this was actually something that gave her pleasure. And the reason I think that, again, is because she's still claiming that that she wasn't doing this, that it was just happening to her. She's not fully taking responsibility. And I think that she did, in fact, enjoy it. And I don't think she wants people to know that. But she says, yeah, it happened again. It just happened. My anger would escalate during arguments over household chores or my husband coming to bed late. I remember feeling I was out of my body, watching myself and telling myself to stop, but I couldn't. Again, there's that definitive word, could not. I would hit him hard, hitting to hurt. So what she's saying here is that, and I think that without saying it, she's describing it. I believe this comes from some type of contempt and hatred and disdain she has for men specifically, that she's taking this out on her husband. Because look at what she's talking about here. She's claiming that she's feeling surges of uncontrollable rage over arguments like doing household chores, or he didn't come to bed at a time that was convenient enough for her, because I guess the world revolves around her. And again, this is not somebody that's like a stay-at-home dad or something like this. This is a man who has a job. As she said, he works in IT. So this is a guy who's going to work all day, coming home, and then his wife is and according to her, in her own words, psychologically, physically, emotionally assaulting him. And for nonsense things like he didn't do the dishes. It's not as if he's done something really bad that would warrant a response in that proportion. That's why I'm suggesting that she has some type of underlying hatred for men that she has not dealt with. That's what the simmering rage is about. Okay. But she was absolutely able to control her behavior. And like I said, I think that she enjoyed it, and that's why she kept doing it. She's dissociating. According to her, she's having out-of-body experiences. That's not normal. It's suggests to me this is somebody who experienced some type of childhood trauma, or we're literally dealing with a psychopath or sociopath. A sociopath is sort of like a secondary psychopath, like a learned psychopath. Those are people who they develop psychopathic traits as coping mechanisms because of trauma they experience very early as a child, that they get CPTSD from and things of this nature. It's sort of like they develop that to survive. A primary psychopath is somebody that is born that way. And yeah, so she like I think we're dealing with somebody who had obviously something happen to them in their childhood, maybe that caused them to have a severe disdain, contempt for, and hatred of men. And then she's like taking this all out on her husband. And she says, one time I picked up a table and crashed it down so hard on the ground it broke. I left bite marks in his arm a couple of times. It was similar to the way siblings fight, yet he never once struck back. He'd hold up his hands to shield himself, which made me feel even worse. So this is the guy who is not, he doesn't raise a hand, doesn't strike her back. And this is a woman who is continuously physically attacking him, emotionally, psychologically, and he doesn't do anything to fight back. And she's doing it things this insane. She's throwing tables, and she's doing it so hard. She's breaking tables. For somebody who's a small woman, like, we're talking about a level of rage here this latent rage, anger, hatred. There's more to this story, okay? She says, I know my husband felt emotionally hurt at times. So here she is already dismissing and validating what she's done to him and just saying, oh, he felt emotionally hurt at times. Excuse me, you engaged in a persistent pattern of psychological, emotional, and physical abuse against this man for 10 years. It's more than just he felt a little emotionally hurt at times. Are you out of your mind? She says it was upsetting for him to think the person he loved wanted to hurt him, but he never threatened to leave me. Why? He felt there was more to me than this behavior and that we still had a strong marriage. I'm a petite woman, a little over 8 stone, and my husband is a big man, yet he said he didn't feel emasculate. What? Why would you not? Okay, there's something weird with this relationship, like with this man too. How would you not feel emasculated by that? It's just insane to me. She says, and he claims that I never physically hurt him. You bit him so much you left bite marks in him. You just admitted that, like the paragraph up. What? While I exploded, he remained calm. I was thankful, but I was also frustrated he wasn't communicating fully with me. What? I was using violence to get a reaction. I was verbally aggressive too. I would make demeaning comments, sarcastic and personal attacks, all the things that erode love. I'd blame him, preach, and criticize. You're still doing that in this article. Oh, poor me. It's actually his fault that I beat him because he wasn't communicating with me fully. So I just did what I had to do to get a reaction out of him. And actually, you should feel sorry for me that this happened to me. That's how this woman sounds. It is amazing. She sounds like an absolute narcissist. I couldn't understand why I wanted to be aggressive to someone I loved. I lack self-awareness. Well, judging by the article, you still do. She says, I now realize the anger I felt was to do with stress and low self-esteem. Again, diminishing what she was doing and not taking accountability and responsibility. That is not true. There are lots of people who experience stress and who have low self-esteem who do not act the way that you do, who don't treat people the way that you treated your husband. There are people who deal with stress and low self-esteem and they don't physically lash out at people. Stop making excuses. She says, I was packing my life too tightly, working long hours as a lawyer, volunteering at the Citizens Advice Bureau, and doing soup runs for the homeless. I had what I felt was a privileged upbringing. Yeah, I can tell. My family was middle class and I went to private schools. I felt I had an obligation to repay this to society. I thought I should be superhuman, and I felt my husband should be too. To other people, I seemed calm and accommodating, a kind of peacemaker, but inside I was pent up and deeply ashamed of myself. Now, I want to unpack this because this is also where she's revealing a lot about her mindset and why she's doing these things, right? She's working as a divorce lawyer. She's volunteering at a Citizens Advice Bureau, and then she's doing soup runs for the homeless. Do you think that she actually cares about homeless people or like doing something to fix the homeless crisis? No. What she's describing is wanting to look superhuman so she looks good to other people. She's describing wanting to look perfect. And she wanted her husband to do so also. She wanted him to look perfect. And she's even saying that on the outside, like if you were just somebody on the outside looking in at her and her husband, you would have no idea that this is happening behind closed doors. She was so good at hiding it, she appeared on the outside calm, accommodating, a peacemaker, when at home she's the exact opposite of that. That also suggests a level of narcissism in that she's wearing this mask, right? That she's wearing for other people. And again, it's very superficially oriented to making herself look good. Eventually, I accepted something had to change. Well, apparently it took 10 years for you to accept that something had to change. And is that really reasonable for a grown woman, for a grown adult in an adult relationship? I don't think so. I'd heard about DV groups, but only for men. I felt my behavior carried an added stigma. Women weren't expected to be this way, especially high-powered working women who volunteered for charities. No, like what she's saying is That's exactly what I would expect, really. What do I expect from philanthropists? You all know what I call them. uh no, people like this, when you see someone that's a high-powered professional and they're volunteering for charities and all this other stuff, you get the perception not that they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart, but they're doing it for attention. They're doing it for validation. They're doing it so they can look good, so they can show off to other people about their accomplishments and brag. That's what she's describing. Like, this is the kind of person she is. She goes on to say, then I found an anger management course on the internet. It was nerve wracking at first, and I knew I'd have to face up to aspects of my life I'd prefer to overlook. I think she's still overlooking them because we haven't heard about them yet in the article. What are these aspects of yourself that you hadn't looked into, that you were not self-aware about? She says, yet the course was a turning point, and by the time it finished, I felt confident I could control myself. No, she was always able to control herself. She just didn't want to. She didn't have an incentive to. She says, then 2 years later, I hit my husband again. I had become complacent, assumed that I'd changed. So when I slapped his face for the last time, I was forced to confront the situation. This time I told my family and friends what had been happening. That they didn't criticize or judge was a huge help. Soon after, I decided to go part-time as a lawyer and mediator, and now I run a course to help people deal with anger and conflict. Now she's accepted this, now that she's able to profit from it, right? This is her new thing. She's not a divorce lawyer making money off of destroying families. Now, this time, she's selling the anger management course, right? So it's kind of like, you start thinking, like, can you believe anything that this narrator is telling us? It's an unreliable narrator, right? Because this is clearly somebody who has an agenda. Is this story true at all? Or did she just make it up because it would help her sell her mediator skills better, right? And like, oh, look how much I've overcome with anger and conflict, and now I can teach you the same thing, right? She says, my husband and I are, oh, and by the way, like I said, I asked you guys to, as we were reading this article, try to um, imagine that a man was describing doing this to a woman. She says that she told her friends and family that she'd been physically, emotionally, and psychologically harming her husband for a decade, and they don't criticize her or judge. If it was a man who disclosed to his friends and family he'd been doing this to his wife for a decade, do you think that they wouldn't criticize or judge him? I think that they would. I think they would immediately be telling that wife to leave him. What are you doing with him? Like, they're we know it would be different, but because she's a woman, oh, she's the victim, even though here she's been the aggressor and the abuser for years. Um, so I thought this was crazy. And then she ends it by saying, the husband and I are still together. She's careful not to choose language that is too aggressive. Okay. She says, if I ever get angry and feel my heartbeat quicken, I leave the room, but that is rare. I wouldn't claim our marriage is now perfect, but it's pretty good. It is a caring and gentle relationship, which feels like a big achievement for me. Why, like, why though? Why would it be a big achievement for you to have a caring and gentle relationship? Like, that's what relationships are supposed to be like. So again, that makes me think that there's something more that has gone on in her life that she is not telling the audience about, that she's not giving them insight to. And it says, as told by Jill Clark, so I wonder if that's the name of this woman here who wrote this. And again, it's just kind of like, it's one of those things where you're looking at this and thinking like, wow, if a woman put out an article like this, or I'm sorry, a man put out an article like this describing doing these things that she's describing to a woman, that person would be immediately canceled. Like, this is crazy to me. And then just the fact that, like, she's done this for years and claims that she couldn't control herself, and then she finally confesses, and she's the victim, everybody supports her, no one criticizes, there's nobody judging her, and then they're all like, oh, let's get her help. But nowhere in the article does it describe like what her husband has done for help. It doesn't say if like the husband went to therapy or if like the husband learned about, like it doesn't say if he got help, right? Like he doesn't matter in the story. It's so weird to me that she is supported and viewed as the person who needs to be helped, while this while describing like the things she described. I'm just like, I don't know, I still feel flabbergasted. Maybe I shouldn't though. And I will say too that I worked in family law for a little bit, and I know like how these divorce lawyers are. And I would suggest that like that also says like a lot about her too, because I remember when I worked in family law, like these lawyers would encourage women to lie about their husbands um aing them so they could get custody of the children or retain the home. They would get these restraining orders. Like they would strategize ways to just come up with egregious lies in order to like destroy a family and make and profit from it, you know. And everything was about having billable hours, and it's just really sad and a really gross industry in general, you know, the family law thing, and what happens to the children because they never are like the focus of anything. The whole thing is designed to make money. The courts make money. They assign guardians ad litem to these kids. The kids are forced to go into therapy and all this other nonsense where it really is like a racket. So that's the world she's coming from. And yeah, I think it's just quite telling. And like I said, I do not think that The Guardian would publish an article like that today with a woman so openly and brazenly talking about treating a man that way, because our society likes to pretend that men aren't mistreated or they can't be abuse victims or things like this, and we know that that's just not true, and that in fact most of the discrimination, gender discrimination that we see today is not against women, is actually geared towards men. There are more women in quote unquote higher education and college than there are men. I think it's like 60% women to 40% men, and that number is dropping more and more by the year. Like society generally has failed men and boys and treats them horribly. And I think this article and this woman talking about this and the flippant way that she does is just a reflection of that underlying sickness in society. So that's it though. I'm interested to hear what you guys think of this. What are your thoughts? And I hope you guys have a good day. Whee!